Hello, and I'm Mark Douglas with The See Within You. I'm hoping to give you an introduction to the Huber Midpoint timing system or life clock today. And the context for this is to provide you with a strong level of the basics. I think get your understandings in line. It's not going to answer all your questions of age point, but it should at least give you enough of confidence to decide if you want to explore it further and whether it's worthy within using it in your own charts or with your clients as well. So let's get started. Today I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a Huber primer. I have to do this because the Huber system is a bit different and it does relate to age points. So just enough of a walkthrough to give you some context. This age point system, nuts and bolts, this is when we really get into it. And actually, I recommend this book, Life Clock by Bruno and Louise Huber. There's many more. You can go to astrologicalpsychology.org. All the resources, all the Huber books are listed there, and absolutely recommend getting all of them. But if you want one that holds the balance of all the technical bits that you could ever want, the Life Clock book absolutely holds that. And throughout, I'm going to provide a level of examples. I'm not going to overly state the age point system through hundreds and hundreds of examples, but at least give you enough of an understanding as I showcase more later on and create some new video sets that you'll at least have a little bit of a context to be able to relate it to real working charts. So the basics of Huber Astrological Psychology is really to understand psychosynthesis, which is really to understand Dr. Roberto Assagioli. So the Hubers developed this system largely starting off in 1958 when they moved to Florence and lived with Roberto Assagioli for 3 years. Roberto Assagioli is contemporary of Freud and Jung. He's most aligned, although he was a psychoanalyst, and Freud really set him up as the prime psychoanalyst in Italy. He was much more of the holistic psychospiritual orientation and really held on that the entire individual is an integrated system to really not reject any parts within it. So it's not about psychoanalysis, it's literally about psychosynthesis and bringing parts of ourselves together. The Hubers were esotericists and spent a lot of time with the likes of the Theosophists and within the Alice Bailey traditions and the Arcane school. So did Assagioli. So their roots really begin from there. Assagioli developed this therapeutic approach based on people living as complete integrated human beings. This is his famous egg model that's absolutely worth exploring if you have the time. And the stated goal was for people to live as well as possible and to look at oneself with a smile. And yeah, Assagioli was an absolute humanitarian. He actually let a client live in his home for 18 years for free. This is Casa Assagioli in Florence, Italy. So the Hubers and their approach is really an esoteric approach to astrology, meaning there's always something in behind the scenes going on. We place a considerable amount of emphasis in this aspect structure that I'll show you in the next slides. And psychosynthesis in Huber astrology is absolutely fundamentally holistic. It's fundamentally esoteric and it has its own checks and balances, clearly documented. Every book is well specified in terms of how it works, so you can try it out for yourself, see if it can offer any value to you. In the Hubers, in our Huber normal kind of birth chart, I'm going to walk you through the 5 layers because I do realize it is a bit different if you're coming from other astrologies, traditional or modern, especially with having the house system on the outside like this. So let's unpack this. There's 5 main layers, and in the center, this white dot represents the soul, the Atman, the inner higher self, the central core of the person, whatever name you want to use. We don't draw aspects through it. We hold that there is an intentionality from this center that emanates outward into this second layer here, the aspect pattern, which really, this system in here, extremely well researched. It's where we spend a lot of time working with clients because it represents the inner unconscious motivation of the individual. It's not just a bunch of pretty, colorful lines. It's been really, really well researched to understand the inner motivation based on the color, the shaping, the orientation, you name it. Very powerful. The next layer out, level 3, as you can clearly see here, represent everything you already know but the planets. So the moon representing our emotions, our feeling self, our inner child, everything you already know. We represent the purple planets, Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, obviously as transpersonal planets, and the moon, Saturn, and sun here as our ego planets, and that's beyond what we'll get into today, in case you're wondering why they're different colors. Lastly, this last layer out here, I'll draw this around as well because I think this is where the juice is for age point. The last layer out after the planets move through the signs to level 4, so the moon in here is obviously in Sagittarius, and then the last layer of the house system really represents the environment around us and where we live and breathe and act every day. So if you're at home right now, you're in your 4th house, or what we're literally doing right now is a bit of 9th house higher learning type stuff. So the expression of this inner core moves its way out and finally lands on the environment. And this energy curve here, definitely spend a lot of time relating to this because it's central to the age point timing system. Okay, so that's enough for the Huber system. Just want to give you a bit of a taste. There's also 3 charts we use within Huber, and I'll just quickly say there's your natal chart. There's a house chart, which shows our conditioning, what the environment saw, therefore tried to promote in us. So what the environment sees versus our real natal kind of integral self. And also we have this moon node chart, or the nodal chart, which reflects the shadow, accumulation of past lives. Extremely effective, extremely well researched through a lot of depth psychology. All 3 charts combined form the basis of the Huber system. When you're doing your charts and we're looking at these, the Hubers use very specific orbs. They were very well researched, and they basically said they're only valid if they were able to be observable across a wide range of conditions and people's charts. You name it. A lot of years of empirical research with Assagioli's case files and further research. So when you derive your charts through astro.com or through your software, it automatically does it. I just want to point this out that we have a specific orb table. I think lastly, we're getting there. This is the aspect patterns, the center of that chart that I mentioned. There's over 45 of them with lots of wild and crazy names. Like I mentioned, we use color in a very precise way, and the patterns can become activated in the age point that I'll show you. So that's why I'm mentioning this as well. These patterns are really well researched, holistic gestalt, complete understandings, if you will, of various components of the psyche, and absolutely worth checking into if you're motivated into Huber astrology. All right, just when you thought we'd never get there, finally going to start tackling the age point system and how it works. I'm going to take my time and also detail it enough so that you can hopefully walk through this confidently and get enough of an understanding. So what we're looking at is a birth chart, and I drew this arrow here because way the age point system works is visually it works like a clock but in reverse. At birth, the age point is on the AC. As we progress, as you can see, the ages here, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way 6 years per house, that there is various things going on from each level of the age point system. As it moves at a rate of 6 years per house going around the chart, there is a course of 6 times 12, 72 years by the time it makes its way around the chart and just simply starts over again until the curtain draws. As you can quickly also see then, I should point out, I'm going to mention this earlier, it's 6 years per house. It doesn't matter the size of the house. So this is a small house, it's 6 years. The 11th house here is very big, but it's still 6 years. As you can see, the numbers kind of go from 60 to 66, from 0 to 6 here. So as this hand of the clock moves around counterclockwise, there's various things it's doing relating to this energy curve. It's changing signs, as you can see here, at around just before age 6. It's going from Gemini to Cancer. It's then entering into the second house, which means something. It's going to be conjuncting the moon at age 7, which will definitely mean something. And it's going to be always moving around the chart, forming aspects to these planets, whether it's conjunctions, oppositions, sextiles, squares, and we do use the semisextile and the quincunx and trines. So there's always something going on, but fundamentally at birth is this timing system that starts, and it starts moving its way around the chart at any one given moment. Then, for example, at age almost 31 here, 30 3/4, we can see that we're going to be at the conjunction to Pluto, which sounds like an awful lot of fun. This is how we kind of relate experiences for individuals. In Scorpio, conjuncting Pluto is going to absolutely mean something for this individual. So that is just a brief understanding of how we even get started with Huber age point system, is that it's this internal timing system. It's not external like transits. It's an internal progression system of sorts. Let's carry on. So how it works is it kind of provides a table of contents or a biography of one's life. It describes what gets invoked at certain periods. Not all of our chart plays out all at once, although arguably some charts do get a lot playing out all at once. The way we use age point is we always use age point system first, pretty much. And then we would use, for example, progressions or transits or whatever. But we always give the story of the backdrop by quickly looking at the age point system to see what's going on. And you can get a lot of information just by using age point system first, then seeing if, for example, in the age point system, if there's forming an aspect to, say, Pluto, then if we go into our transits, progressions, and also see a correlation within, then you've really got something, because if the age point is highlighting a planet, you can take it to the bank that there's going to be something related going on if we're looking at transits, progressions, that type of thing. Okay. So the age point system does deal directly with why primarily, so not really external events. I don't really know what a conjunction to Pluto in the 5th house really represents in that previous chart I was showing you, but we do know that the actual effect of experiencing Pluto conjunction in Scorpio in that relevant house is absolutely vital, if that makes sense. So it's really showing an inner kind of conscious alignment with the planetary archetypes and experiencing those based on the aspects they formed, etc., etc., the signs, you name it. So I just want to point that out. It's an excellent system to include since it provides that kind of larger viewpoint and context. And it is very accurate, having gone through hundreds of charts working with clients, that the information it provides at that level, you can very much take it to the bank, that if somebody is conjuncting Pluto or forming an opposition to Uranus or something at that larger level, it's absolutely going to show up in their lives. It's what they're going to be relating to in terms of direct experiences in the consultation. If you want to derive your charts, you can go over to astro.com, get them for free. So derive your birth chart, go to extended chart selection, as you can see here. And I know it's changed a little bit. They've changed their website. Then make sure you select Huber style chart. And then under additional tables, it'll allow you to draw this table of your age point progressions. It's not as clean as slick if you have the Regulus software from Cathar software. I'm a very visual person, but it does derive a list of tables, so you can see that obviously in 77 in September here that there was a trine to Jupiter going on right here, sorry. Oh, my apologies. And that's, you can go through a list here and see the various aspects it's forming and different stages within the actual chart itself. I find it not as visual and easy for me, but this is an easy way to grab a list of tables for your chart. So moving right along, finally get into some technical bits. I'm going to do my best to take my time with each one and explain these, because I do realize it's new concepts for you. So hold tight. So very important, we use the Koch house system within the Huber age point system and within Huber charts, so make sure you're always relating this to the Koch house system. The timing system itself is based on the houses, so it's not based on the signs. So that's why we're really emphasizing Koch here. I mentioned this previously, but it's always 6 years per house regardless of the size of the house. So from the 3rd house to the 4th house is a very big house, and it would take 6 years to go through this house. And likewise for this 5th house to the 6th house here, it's a small house, but it's still 6 years. As a result, you have to really get your skates on, if you will, and it's going to be moving through here very quickly. You're going to move through a conjunction over top of Neptune much more quickly, as opposed to in here, everything's going to move slowly, so that conjunction with Uranus will feel as though it's taking forever. I just want to point that out. It's always 6 years per house, and I found that really confusing. So visually, it's just the way the math works out is that it's always 6 years. You don't have to calculate and worry about that, but if it can throw you off wondering why this would be the same as this, it's they are. So they're always 6 years. So to talk about the age point really requires us to talk about this intensity curve, or that energy curve on the outside of the chart, that wave-like pattern that I mentioned before. What we're really going to speak about is that each house has places where planets can express their energies easily into the world, and there's also places where they can't express their energy so easily. As we know, there's 4 main angles in the birth chart, the AC/DC, IC/MC. Those are real energy points, massive power, and whenever, as you know, planets close to these cusps, there's going to be a major emphasis on them in the client's life. But we also know through lots of research, especially using the Koch house system, the planets near any of these interior cusps have a very stronger expression as well too. They're less than the main 4 angles, but there's absolutely ability to affect the planet's energy, its presence out to the world, the closer they are to these cusps. So a planet close to a cusp here is going to be more effective out in the world than a planet down here at the bottom of this trough. I'll explain that further. A planet near the cusp will be picked up easily by the environment, and perhaps a bit wildly. There would be a real outpouring of energy. The reason that works is because this is the real world out here. I'll draw this out for you. This is the real world out here. So a planet that is sitting right here is very much closer to the real world people and picking up to it, so therefore it expresses itself. Any planets down here, if we go right to the bottom of the trough, this energy curve, they're going to struggle to be heard. So they're going to be less able to kind of get that energy out to the environment. And at the balance point, it's a nice comfortable zone where they're not being asked to do too much out in the world, and yet they're not completely deflated as well towards the center of the chart. They can just kind of get that nice balance point of inner and outer alignment. Just pointing that out because it will come into, we'll understand this more as we're kind of working through some examples with the age point system. And if it's your first time looking at this, it's just important to note that through any of the houses, any of the 12 houses, any planets that are close to this kind of cuspal zone, right about, anywhere at this first kind of leg here, will be much more easier to express themselves, be effective. A low point. So a planet near the bottom of that trough, the planets here, or the age points here, more importantly, because that's what we're talking about, tend to be hidden from the world. It's a real turning point where a crisis occurs and we're forced to confront ourselves. It can be quite depressive periods as a result, but when you think of crisis of opportunity and changing points and systems. You're likely to make a fuss in trying to be noticed, but the environment will likely find you irritating the more you try. It's literally like you're down a well, closer to the chart center, where we can work effectively with the energies at the inner level, hence that crisis of opportunity. So let's try to explain this. Within the age point system here, this is what this diagram here is really showing, this diagram. As the age point system is moving through it, for example, here at the MC, it moves through this process of real outpouring of cardinal capable energy. It's very capable of expressing itself. But at the low point here, the planet is, like I said, down the well and really wants to align itself with its inner energies. There's always this, as a result, we become more closer to what the soul's needs are, inner needs are, and there's this pulling away from the environment and more to cause a kind of an internal realignment anytime the age point system moves through this low point phase. The last third relates, I did a whole presentation on this, to ISAR, on the Goklan effect of the real stress effect, because what happens is a planet moving through this last third period is in a stress zone where it's serving the needs of the house currently and also really more interested in the affairs of the next house. So it becomes this compensation effect with the planet or the age point is just really going crazy trying to express itself. So what does this all mean? Throughout any of the houses, we have these low points, and even in the 8th house here, there's this age 45 or so is the low point of the whole chart. And what it reflects is a complete, as you know, the midlife crisis, that whole idea with the age 45 system. But in any house system, seeing where the age point is that clients are usually faced with a transition from one state to another. They've been expressing themselves capably here because it's near the cusp, like I was mentioning. The environment's picking up on their energies. It's go, go, go. It's fruitful, cardinal energy time. Then there's the realignment. So that's the gist of kind of how we relate to these low point experiences. It's actually, I'm just going to quickly point this out. We do have a whole system of looking at how strong a planet can be by sign, but that's really another discussion, another day. Essentially, it relates to about 11.5 or 12 degrees is where a planet can wield its potential quite easily. I realize you've probably never seen this before as well, too. Let's just park that for now and keep going on. So I realize that's a bit technical side of it, but I just want to explain, seeing that the house system has energy points that you're able to be more effective and capable in, and that at low points, planets are going to be going through an internal realignment of, what our true self really wants. And there's a real crisis of opportunity. The more that we can become aware of that, the less of a drastic crisis it is, and it can be a real chance to come into alignment with what we're trying to really unpack in this life. So let's move on now to some of the main points within the age point system. First off, this is a list that will give you a bit of context of kind of breaking down how we can look at where somebody's age point currently is and what's going on for them. First thing is looking at which house the age point is in. So they're going to be experiencing the effects of that house very closely. Whether we're looking at the actual, for example, third house of early schooling and child experiences, fourth house of family, you name it, it's at seventh house of relationships. Take note of which house it's in. The next is to really look at the aspects. So conjunctions and oppositions are primary because at a conjunction we're facing off directly with that planetary energy. And in oppositions, it's the same effect, although it feels as though it's coming to us from afar. We also use semi-sextiles, sextiles, squares, and quincunxes. I make a note about quincunx to Plutos can be intense. So the age point position in the house, as we talked about within that energy curve, is it in the cardinal area where it can really express itself? Is it at the balance point where both inner and outer pieces of our psyche are kind of at equilibrium? Or is it more towards that kind of low point fixed area of the chart where there's going to be an inner orientation for the individual? They're going to be doing a major shift, crisis of opportunity. Or is it in that last kind of stressed area where there's a real kind of pull to get over top of that mountain to the next house, and there's this overcompensation effect of really leaning in heavily, and you find the individual working really, really hard at that stage and feel as though they're literally climbing a mountain and trying to get somewheres fast. The sign and the element, so for example, if it's in Libra, it's in an air sign and it's a cardinal, so just relating it to obviously the modes that it's in, elements. So very important to understand everything you know about signs now, and everything about those qualities will be carried forward. I'm going to unpack this more. This is just a quick table to get you started. Also, when the age point comes over certain aspect patterns, etc., and yes, there's midpoints involved, and there's something what we call the crossing point, which is major, and I always use it, and I'll explain that as well too. These are the main ways of using the age point system that we'll try to unpack for you today. This is showing you how we relate to the houses in Huber. And I'll just quickly unpack this for you. In the first house and the seventh house, this axis is called the encounter axis between the self and others, whether they're relationships in everything from marriage to partnerships to business orientation. So we call it the encounter axis. The possession axis relates to either my own resources, self-worth, money, versus other people's resources, formal society, hence called the possession axis. The third house and ninth house is the thought axis of early learning thoughts versus that higher life philosophy, university, education, etc. The fourth and 10th relates to the individuality axis, where we come into all experiences in the family and roots and tradition, matched with where we stand up in the world, our vocation, that kind of force of everything in the MC to deal with vocation and getting out there. The fifth house is the relationship axis. Down here, it's the collective fun and games relatability versus our exclusive chosen groups of friends in the 11th house. And then lastly, the existence axis, where we either exist in service or we kind of are down general collective, duking it out in that kind of existing for others and work and you name it, versus the ontological processing, that hidden enigmatic 12th house, where we come inward and spend time deeply contemplating the universe, you name it, either withdrawing from that real busy existence axis down here in the 6th. So to unpack this chart, what we have here, just quickly go through this, then from the first house, from age 0 to 6, is really concerned with the formation of the I. The second house from age 6 to 12 is that creation of life awareness of possessions. Third house deals with, from age 12 to 18, learning and education, collective norms. Fourth house, 18 to 24, detaching from our parental home and really individuating. And we can see that a lot with charts where they're just, the age point enters into the fourth house, and that individual finally, decides to leave home, for example, that type of situation. In the fifth house is really a testing out of life experiences. We know this because we see this with the Saturn return at around age 29 and a half or so. The fifth house has become really where we're testing out those games and looking at ourselves from that lens. In the sixth house of age 30-36, it's really about coping with and establishing an existence of our own, getting more into the serious level of life, past that demarcation point of the Saturn return, where we get on and really dig into ourselves with establishment. In the seventh house, 36 to 42, is really important because, as you can see up here, we've poked our head above the horizon again, and it's a very conscious area of the chart as a result. There's an intense outward focus around relationships, partners. At the 8th house, 42 to 48, is really a transformation and rebirth phase, midlife crisis at that age 45 low point. 9th house is really the formation of our individual life philosophy, and that's age 48 to 54. 10th house is really looking at our authority, individuation, self-realization phase. That's up until about age 60. And we really hit that spiritual maturity at around age 60 as well too. In the 11th house, it's really a focus and shifting towards freely chosen friends and relationships groups. And the 12th house, age 66-72, the introversion, solitude, ontological period. So these are forming backdrops to life stages within every individual. And if we hold this in context, then we can see, based on which house it's in, what the planets in those houses and the signs, how it reflects. So in other words, in this house here, we can see that at about age 6 or so, this individual is in Libra, and it's conjuncting Pluto, which is the opposition to Mars as well here. So anytime there's an experience with Pluto at an early age like that, we start to quickly look at the chart and understand what's going on, what was going on that was significant around Pluto's unmodifiable principle at that age. Can give us clues to absolutely early traumas, early influences, and can save us a lot of time by quickly biographically going through and looking at where the planets are for that individual at these stages, just noticing which house it's in. So right at the cusp of the second house, self-worth, possessions, and Pluto across this axis would be extremely important to catalog for that individual. For this individual, it spoke to, I believe this is Justin Trudeau's chart, Prime Minister of Canada, and I believe that this was the period in which his parents divorced. So galvanizing a real strong effect at that age around Pluto and self-worth. Number 2 in our list, we spoke about aspects, conjunctions and oppositions as being primary. Aspects to planets are very important, and conjunctions and oppositions occur only once every 72 years. So if you look at Charles Dickens' chart here, we can see that right at around age 24 or so, Charles Dickens' age point was conjunct Mercury, and see how it was at this cuspal region here in strong, strident, capable Capricorn. It is in the cardinal zone of really, really strong, capable capacity, outpouring of energy picked up by the environment, on top of Mercury, our way of communicating. He's a writer, and it was also activating that sextile to Uranus. So at that point, it's complete immersion into Mercury. If it was square, it would be more challenging, requiring action. Quincunxes bring about deep lessons, but there is, at a conjunction, no way of avoiding kind of that planetary energy, whether it's conjunctions or oppositions. The drives of that planet absolutely take hold in our lives, and the only difference is that an opposition really showcases events happening from afar. Lots of energy, but it's more of this energy that's controlled coming at you from the other side of that opposition. And yes, for Dickens, this is when he famously launched his, as we know, back in 1836 for Dickens, this is when he began his monthly installments of the first novel, The Pickwick Papers. This novel became a huge publishing phenomenon, going from selling 500 copies of the first installment to over 40,000 of the last one in 1847. So in this, what we really get is this major emphasis of overtop of Mercury. When was it going to happen? Connecting with the sextile to Uranus, you could probably see that this outpouring of energy in this cardinal zone, you can start to quickly build a story that this is going to be a significant opportunity for the individual at this point. Number 3 in my list, as I already kind of stated, the age point position in a house. Is it in the cardinal, balanced, fixed, low point, mutable stress zone? Well, in Charles Dickens' case, when he was so successful in reaching out into the world, was absolutely happening right at a cardinal point. So that's very important to see that our capacity to bring these planetary drives out to the world are absolutely emphasized at a cardinal zone. Number 4, sign and element. So this is really important. When the age point enters a new sign and a new house, it's a really huge moment. The sign and its quality really does form the backdrop to the position of the age point, and a change from one sign to the next is obvious. All your knowledge already of signs, elements, qualities directly applies. So when we move from water to fire, it's a very steamy, energy, initiatory type of process. We were in that emotional, perhaps scorpionic period, moving through the depths of Scorpio, and then our age point transitions into Sagittarius. Bam. There's going to be a lot more going on entering into the fiery, mutable energy right from the fixed scorpionic period. You will notice an orientation from the individual going from that quality of Scorpio into really aligning with wanting to broaden their horizons, wanting to travel, you name it. Clients during COVID that were moving through Sagittarius, just making that change with their age point, were really struggling because they couldn't travel. So they had to find new ways of how do you broaden your horizons and lean into Sagittarius energy if we're stuck in our COVID restrictions in our houses. When we move from, for example, Sagittarius to Capricorn, from fire to earth, it's going from that fiery initiation to more focus on consolidation and completion. So, in other words, it's more practical, earthy. It doesn't carry the same energy as fire. Life can take on a much more slower pace, as preservation and emphasis is really maintenance, is really emphasized. So in this case here, taking care of the kids, taking care of the homestead, you name it, whatever needs to be really dealt with at that kind of earthy level. From earth to air, there is a real lightening up. From the heaviness of earth, it becomes a developmental time, especially in Gemini. There's less emphasis on the previous practicalities and signs of earth, and we're now, like the hot air balloon here, really moving up. You can see in my chart at the top corner here, when I was entering into Gemini, I can absolutely speak to it and speak to all the hundreds of clients I've worked with, but basically went through 4 universities, environmental studies, education, moving, changing jobs, crazy Gemini period, and you name it. So it was really Gemini oriented. You'll see the actual shift within yourself and your clients as soon as they move through these cusps of taking on those qualities. It's kind of hilarious. From air to water, we're led by sensitivity and led by our emotions. So it can be deep and very powerful. For example, Scorpio, the fixed water Scorpio will behave much differently than the mutable kind of orientations that you're aware of. So use your regular knowledge of signs, okay? So any of the fixed signs, we are absolutely going to be relating to this holding on patterns, and we're going to be pulling in the actual qualities of the signs themselves. Your reactions to the environment are considerably more sensitive than they were, and the cry for home and safe harbors of a nest, for example, if you're moving into Cancer, starting a family, I can absolutely relate that these shifts will come about almost overnight, moving from one to the other, and I think you'll find that it becomes a very accurate form of understanding these internal types of calibrations and motivations once we change signs. So how does it really work? Just to give an example, this is a client, some I know very well, and this person was working in a caring role, going through their Piscean period, mutable period of time. They had 2 caregiver jobs. Part-time fun was working in special needs, geriatric kind of facility, contemplated entering the priesthood, etc., etc. Their ingress to Aries, though, gave up that Piscean work, finally started dating, and was no longer kind of entering the convent, entering the priesthood, if you will. Took on more leadership roles, more I-focused, more self-centered, more ego-driven. And a friend of mine mentioned it's as though they're a completely different person. And of course, check their age point. They had just moved into Aries. And this was really significant for the individual because they literally, as sweet of a caring individual this person is, it became much more I-centered and breaking down the boundaries of, why didn't they date up until this point, things of this nature. The Aryan kind of spring-like energy gave a lot more emphasis towards doing just that, moving into this fiery Aryan mode of doing what I want to do and moving from this real state shift, if that makes sense. Another example of being in a water sign is this individual client moving through the 7th house of relationships through Scorpio. So that's going to be intense. Very heavy Scorpio period in the 7th house previously, right over top of this Uranus configuration. Major marriage issues, really qualifying relationships, almost broke up, that whole thing. Very Uranus in Scorpio 7th house, age point conjuncting it, everything you could imagine. And they didn't, by the way, but it was very intense. As they moved in, though, I do make mention Pluto was on top of their moon during this period, but they were very excited for this incoming Sagittarius ingress. Of course, this is an individual that had to live through this broadening horizons of Sag while being hunkered down during COVID, so it was less so. But the energy shift was extremely evident for them, and the shift from Scorpio to fire and the releasing of that energy from water to fire was extremely evident, and it works even on that simple basis. Number 5 relates to aspect pattern motivate activations. So this is not a detailed analysis of Kurt Cobain, but what we can see here is at this point, yes, he started experimenting with drugs right over top of Neptune, but more importantly, right around these periods, this is when he literally, the nirvana, got kicked into high gear. And you can see this kite formation of Cobain getting activated and really taking flight. But yes, it is kind of hilarious that that's exactly the moment when he started experimenting with drugs and his creativity and whatnot. So aspect pattern motivations, there's over 45. We wouldn't be able to detail them within here. But as we're looking at as the H point moves around, take note if it's hitting a corner or within any of your respective charts, what's going on. Is it hitting a T-square? Is it hitting a grand trine? What aspect patterns are really getting hit, and bring that into context. I can also speak another example of aspect pattern activation using my own chart, sacrificing myself on the altar of reality for you all, is myself. This is called a large learning triangle, this quincunx, sextile, and square. And when my H point activated the sun, I did run the Dublin Marathon. I'm not a runner anymore, by the way. I started university, etc., etc. Yes, met my wife, but more importantly, reflecting the lifelong learning process of me absolutely engaging with a crazy amount of studies and learning at this area. I can honestly pinpoint this of all my trajectory and working in further studies at this exact moment, engaging this large learning triangle directly head on. So these are just some quick patterns you can kind of play into for yourself as well. Right over top of my sun. So it was also a period where I finally had engagement with my will and understood what I was capable of, running the Dublin Marathon and going to university, just this whole, even me and my wife, of having this willfulness engagement of being, feeling as though I was capable and confident, and that whole thing. And yes, I was going through a Gemini period, so lots of learning going on during this sequence. So I'm going to move on right into some examples. They won't be exhaustive, but I want to at least showcase a few to give you a better idea. As we mentioned before, we always use the H point system first, then bring in your progressions, solar arc directions, and then if you must, use transits in that order. I hold my solar returns in context with my H point, so I would use the H point system as well as solar returns kind of at the same time, holding them both in the same breath, in case you're wondering. I try to use solar returns and lunar returns quite often, but I would always pretty much hold the H point in the larger context, unless the client was completely speaking to some archetype and you could clearly see it being representative within the solar return. But to be honest with you, it's always going to be showcasing in the H point system first anyway. This is an example, and I have to give credit to Kelly Surtees Astrology, who I noticed that she did a really great job of really showcasing some basics of using secondary progressions. And I thought, well, to really showcase that the H point system works, it should actually relate with other timing systems, right? I mean, we should be able to see it in action with secondary progressions. And it works out extremely well for Delta Goodrum in using age point system and progressions. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of that. And thank you, Kelly Surtees, for showcasing this. What you can see is, what it notes here, what Kelly mentions is, at the time, there was a conjunction between the Sun and Uranus. This is 26 years later on, looking at Delta's life. The combined energy of the Sun-Uranus pairing, which includes freedom, restlessness, and breaking away, especially in Sagittarius, from the past, describes her life experiences 26 years later. So we're looking at just secondary progressions when her Sun finally moved over completely over top of Uranus, and Kelly does a great job of explaining the impact this would have and looking at breaking away, restlessness from the past. I'm going to marry this up with age points and show you how it works from the age point level. Before we dive in, we can see that for Delta Goodrum, that from age 15 or so to age 35, it's going to be very important and profound for her, because she's going to be conjuncting all this massive pileup of planets and you name it all the way down through here. So it's going to be big, right? Because all our planets except for Moon and the North Node are really up there at the top of the chart. So this period is going to be visually, just by looking at it, we know that we're going to be having some major discussions for this individual throughout here. If we unpack this a bit further, then we know that conjunctions have a direct experience with houses. So this whole quadrant here, from the 4th house to the 7th, is where the money is. It's one of the simplest ways to look at age point, is to see when are these direct experiences going on. In this case, with so much activity here, we can take it to the bank at that level. So, why was Delta successful? Well, we looked at her progressions, and it said that her Sun was moving on top of Uranus. Her age point was also conjuncting Uranus at that point. First thing we want to look at is which house position it's in. It's in the cardinal zone, the capable doing zone, where our energies are really released to the world. There's a surge of Sagittarius energy, the ability to think for oneself and away from the collective forces. It's in the cardinal zone. The environment is able to receive this energy. The 5th house and the age point is where we make our progress in professional life. We tend to be extraordinarily expansive in our desire to conquer the world in one stroke. For Delta, this is especially true in expansive Sagittarius. Moving over top of Uranus, Uranus is creative intelligence, explosive, upheaval, change, turning point. It's a small house, we mentioned that before, so you know that the effect will be strongly felt. Our creative intelligence is activated, and there's a wish to know what lies beyond our everyday world. So, we can unpack this even further by looking at what happened in 2002. In 2002, took up an acting career in Neighbours, which relaunched her musical career. At the Sun age point transit, our solar consciousness is activated. So generally there is a creative urge. I'm going to mark this off here for you. We're looking at this sequence down here. Generally there's a creative urge and desire to sit on top of the pile. The Sun can give confidence to break free and individuate. With a Sun near the age point, the Delta Sun struggles to shine down. It's at the bottom of the chart. It's not really at the top of the chart where it wants to be. So it's down this 4th house. It's in a night chart. However, it's cuspal, intense scorpionic, and strong by sign, which we didn't really get into, but it's at about 16 degrees. This might have been the conjunction that Delta needed, with the opposition to Moon stressed in the 9th and 10th house positions up top here. What we have, and it suggests a real energy surge and vacillation, and she was able to kind of move forward. over top of Saturn, you're going to feel the real physical realities, and in the depth of Scorpio, our own corporeal sense is very much made real. So it was actually a point of having a cancer diagnosis at this point. This is not giving a medical diagnosis. This age point system wouldn't be capable of doing that, but the intense effects of moving over top of Saturn and Scorpio. The more important thing to really relate is this period here of seeing this obviously intense modality of going over top of both of this creative capacity of the sun, held in check with Saturn to this opposition to the moon, was an absolute right period for her on many levels. But moving on, what we see here in the 5th house, midpoint between Uranus and Venus. So this sounds like relationship stuff, and it is. In 2004, Gudrun began dating former Westlife singer Brian McFadden, with whom she collaborated on the duet Almost Here. They were engaged, but the pair ended their relationship in 2011. Gudrun started dating Nick Jonas. They broke up in February 2012. So what do we have? At the midpoint between planets, we experience the dual forces and turning point, even with the age point system. So at this stage of the game, we are leaving the sphere of effect of the first planet and moving into stage for the second. Uranus seeks security, but it does so through some disruption, creative insights. With this kind of, the end of the relationship is signaled really through this midpoint system of both that Uranus and Venus in Sagittarius. It's not suggesting this is going to happen in every case for every client, but we want to look at where the psyche is moving through and developing and give kind of context to itself at this point. If that makes sense of how the midpoint forces of moving from one planet transitory state to the other kind of take hold for us. So I have a few more examples, and I'm going to bring in something what we call the crossing point. Another one here, a question I had from a client: will this be the year I change career and launch my business? I mean, definitely you want to use horary to really answer this effectively. But in the age point system, we can get some really strong insights. Client asks, will I change my career and launch my business? Well, look, your age point was essentially almost sitting on top of Uranus, going to come in direct contact with it. Even at that quick state, by looking at it for 0.2 seconds, we can start to at least see the understanding of what a 10th house Uranus can mean when you're oh so close to just conjuncting it perfectly. It doesn't mean they will or they won't change careers, but you can take this to the bank that the effects of that desirability, if you start there and bring in your progressions, your transits, your solar arcs, whatever you use, your solar lunar returns, this is how the age point system saves so much time. Yeah, and yes, they did obviously change their career, launched their business, and even started some new schooling around this period. Very Uranian moment for them. One of the interesting concepts within the age point system is, I mentioned before that we have a nodal chart, which has its own timing system, and we also have the radix age point system as well. The nodal age point moves in a different direction, which I realize is confusing, but we see that through this description here. So at birth, the nodal system moves in the shadow reverse manner to the radix age point. But they do meet up, and they meet up in a different point in everybody's chart. They intersect, and they'll show up as big moments for individuals that you essentially have the forces of the shadow meeting with the realities of the natal chart. And they're turning points in life. In retrospect, they can be usually observed, but there's about, I rarely see any clients that can't directly relate to these experiences at a profound level for them. So I'll show you what this means. often the only astrological explanation can be found in actually these intersections of these two age points. So let me bring these out and show you what we have. For Kurt Cobain, this crossing point system, when the age point and the natal related, it occurs, and you see it through these two triangles here. You get these points when you have the software, the Regulus software from Cathar software. Or you can calculate it manually using the calculations within LifeClock. But at age 22, around 1989, it began with the launch of the debut album Bleach Nirvana, an absolutely pivotal period of time. And this crossing point can take effect, or can be about a year, give or take, on either side of this age point. So we know that this range within here is going to be extremely significant for the individual. My chart, there was a shift from one career life position. Is actually what made me really kind of believe, if you will, an age point timing system. Right around 2006, up until that period, I was working in information technology. Everything was established for me career-wise, making good money, and I gave it all up. And it was this massive shift, going back to school, moved halfway across the country, got engaged, that whole thing. This was the most momentous change period for me. And the only system that really detailed it out was actually this age point system that showcased this age for me. And it's really interesting to see how that can line up for you and how it relates to the house it's in and everything we spoke of. Where is this crossing point really occurring for you in your charts or in your charts of your clients? I can speak to its individual, and actually just my brother allows me to use this piece within his chart that I'll show you what it was like for the crossing point in concert with Pluto in kind of the 6th house, and how it pulls out for my brother. At that point, he was running for mayor of Charlottetown, and it was going to be a big moment. He was definitely a front runner for it. But then, as a result of our father getting sick, he decides to pull out of the mayor's race, and there was a whole shift for him of his career and focus, and you name it. So let's unpack this. This is his chart, and what you're seeing here on this left side is literally the moment. So at age 6, as we mentioned, or age 6, in the 6th house, we spoke about the seriousness of getting on in our careers and moving through life at a much more concerted, serious manner than the 5th house of fun and games. Over Pluto, the unmodifiable principle of Pluto that changes you, you don't change Pluto, it represents our pneuma and our kind of higher form. In Scorpio, it's about transformation. And in the 6th house, it's how we exist in the world. Even if the crossing point wasn't here, we could say that to be some kind of a story to Pluto. So if we unpack this depth of transformation, the serious emotions over Pluto, our father was very sick, and he was only had really about 6 months left to live. And my brother had to decide for himself what was more important, to spend time with him, and also to qualify, do I really want to be mayor, or there's other things I want to do. My brother is very creative, extremely successful photographer, and this age point system was activating obviously these creative juices of this grand trine for him as well. But it had him through the 6th house, where we get on professionally in our lives over Pluto, really force us to make these heavy decisions. What am I going to do? Am I going to be a mayor? Am I going to go express my creative forces? The crossing point holds that this is the period where it needs to happen. It just so happens that it's occurring right on top of this Pluto, on top of this aspect pattern. So you know that this is going to be epic. And it really was the most epic period for him. And yes, of course, finding relationships at that period, a very significant one. and dealing with everything, but more importantly, of shifting from one state to another over that kind of crossing point was extremely powerful for him and reflects this moment in time. When we were speaking previously to this moment, and he was looking for kind of insights, and his H point was just at that point ahead of the game and wondering what's going on. I could quickly see through here that even with the H point system alone, I said, I have no idea what's going to take place, but I can absolutely guarantee you that you will not be the same coming through this period, and it's challenging you to make big, deep decisions on, do you really want to be the mayor? And it's a time in your life to really qualify where you want to stand with the world, how you want to be in the world at that level. And that was good information because he was able to feed that in and really make those deep decisions that Pluto forces us to do. So I hope that's a bit of insight just on the crossing axis. The fact that it landed on Pluto makes this very, very vibrant and easy to kind of see how its effect can be so powerful. The two softwares I use Regulus Professional Huber Edition through Cathar Astrology Software. You can use it through astro.com. I would say if you're going to use Huber on any kind of committed level, go get the software, and then you can use all the features that I mentioned with the timings around the outside of the chart, do biographical work with the moon node, age point, you name it. But yes, of course, you can derive the tables, as I mentioned, through astro.com to get started right now, so on and so forth. That was all for today, and I'm going to make further videos on age point and more technical bits, more examples. But thank you very much. Hopefully this was a little bit of insight for you into the basics, and hope things are well. Let me know if there's any questions, and I'll see you in the next series of videos. Take care.